Hello and welcome back. In this chapter we will consider position for black when he plays a6 but he leaves his bishop on c5. We have already seen positions when black plays bishop a7 and we have seen what happens if black plays bishop b6, and now we will see what happens if black stays with his bishop on c5. After opening's move, bishop c4, bishop c5, castle, knight f6, d3, castle h3, d6, c3, a6, rook e1, h6, bishop b3, rook e8. Black wants to leave this bishop on c5 here because d4 is not a threat for white, because bishop will just go to a7 and white must continue with his plan, with his standard plan, and that is knight bd2. And now bishop e6. The black's idea is, if white plays knight f1, to play d5, and after he takes d5 he can take knight d5, he can also take with bishop, and after knight g3 this bishop wants to go to f8, and bishop d5 is even better for black, because for example after bishop e3, bishop f8, knight g3, g6, the pawn here is protected, and black has a solid position. It's slightly better for black to wait with g6, play maybe queen d7 or even bishop b3, because after g6 now c4 is possible for white, and after bishop e6, bishop a4, he will have problems with this e5 pawn. That is why after knight g3 black can take, bishop takes b3, a takes b3, and queen b7, queen d7, or even queen d5. And bishop on f8 here is very useful, because white has no longer any motifs on the king side, and black will play rook d8. He has no weaknesses, and I think his position is already preferable. Still, white is not worse here. Instead of knight f1, I will suggest another move, and this is a little bit untypical for this position, and it's bishop takes e6. If black takes with pawn on e6, then white's move is justified, because after b4, bishop a7, a4. This rook on e8 is not very good placed, because his natural square is f8. And the best move here for black is probably rook f8. He can start with queen d7 also. After rook f8, knight c4, queen e8. It's interesting for white to play bishop d2 with the idea of b5. Queen g6, b5, knight e7, and rook e1. And here white has pressure, because it's not clear how black attack should continue, and he's threatening b6, and black cannot play b6 because his bishop on a7 would be just terrible. And later white can play d4 after, for example, knight d7, or he can take and play rook b7, which also looks strong. After b4, bishop a7, a4, queen d7, knight c4, black can play b5, but here white plays knight e3, and white still maintains some pressure. This knight is useful here to defend around the king, and white later can play queen b3, develop his bishop on d2 or b2, and he can choose whether he wants to open a file. That's the main reason why after bishop e6 most of black players play rook e6, which is more logical since rook is already on e-file, and later black has some ideas to play on knight h5 and rook g6 to create some pressure around white king. After rook e6, here white were trying a couple of moves, queen c2, as well as knight f1, but after this I think black just plays d5, and later he can return his bishop to f8 and play rook d8, and his position is very solid and he has nothing to be afraid of. That's why we play b4. Now bishop must go to a7, and now queen c2. It would be nice that we can play a4, but after this already black can play d5, and after queen c2, d4. And now he can take on c3 and play knight d4, and in this position it's very hard for white to find some advantage, because white is slightly better, but I really doubt he can win this game. Instead, queen c2. The idea of this move is mainly after d5 to play knight b3. And now if black plays d4, knight c5. Black must take on c5, otherwise he's just losing pawn on b7, because his rook is hanging as well as his pawn, and after bishop takes c5, b takes c5. Here he can play b6, which is the best move, and he can also take on c3, but after d takes c3, queen c3, he will have a slightly worse position, b5 or b6, c takes b6, c takes b6, and bishop e3. And white pieces have better coordination, his rooks can go to open files, b file, and to press pawn on b6, and also c file, and white maintains some pressure. Instead, after b takes c5, the best move for black is b6, and now white takes on b6, he takes b6 and takes on d4, knight d4, knight d4, queen d4, bishop b2, queen d7, rook c1 for example, rook d8, rook d1, and here black position is okay, but still I think white chances are still a little bit preferable, but not too much. If white is patient enough, he can maybe win this game, but again black should hold this position. After queen c2, that was move d5. Instead, black can play, for example, knight h5 with the idea rook g6, and now knight f1, queen d7, and a4. And white is not afraid of rook g6. White is not afraid of rook g6 because of just knight h4, and this rook has nowhere to go except go back. And later, one of my ideas for white may be to play bishop e3, and after bishop e3 he has a choice which piece to take, or even with pawn, and he wants to play b5 and again open a file and create some pressure on the queen side for black. After queen c2, probably the best move for black is knight e7. He wants to have moves c5 or c6 possible later, and he wants to transfer this knight to g6. After this, white plays knight f1, d5, bishop e3. I think it is interesting move. Now black can take on e4, or he can take on e3. If he takes d takes e4, d takes e4, bishop e3, knight takes e3. Here white is slightly better, and his knights are better placed, and this pawn will go to a5. He has a space advantage on the queen side, and as we have already seen, this is typical in this type of position. Instead of bishop takes c3, actually black has a very strong move, and this is c5. Now the problem for white is if he takes on c5, black will just play queen c7 and later take on c5, and white can have problems with this c3 pawn, because if you observe position long term, it can be pretty dangerous for white. So instead of taking on c5, white needs to play move a4, c takes b4, c takes b4, rook c8. Now important intermediate move, rook d1, queen e8, queen b3, bishop takes c3, knight takes c3. And this position is objectively equal, but still I believe white chances are better here, and the only side which can hope for victory is white here. This knight on e3 can come to f5 or d5, and his pawns here are, I think, better than the black ones, because white can fix black pawns after a5, and still he has some small space advantage. After bishop e3, that was the e4 move. Instead, black can immediately take bishop takes c3, knight takes c3, and play c6 very solid. He will play knight g6, queen c7, and later rook d8 probably. And in the meantime, white cannot play d4. Taking on d5 is also not an option. So the best move here is probably a4. Now white wants to grab more space with move a5. Knight g6, g3. White prevents black from knight f4, and he's not afraid of any attack on the king side. Queen d7, king g2, and now we have come to some typical position in this line. I think still white maintains some small pressure, but black position is very solid, and in my opinion this is one of the best lines for black